hopefully there's no echo. Is there an echo for you, Billy?
I turned off the volume for the Twitch stream.
Good, perfect. Well, we're live.
Hey.
that was my my way of I for some reason I always seem to get echoes whenever I run these things when I'm playing right with my sound deck and all. So that one great way to do it is to test it right from the very beginning. So hi, hey, so who are you?
I am Billy Carando. I am a developer advocate here at IBM, and I kind of specialize particularly like in the Java and Spring. A lot of people who have seen me and know me in the world kind of know me from kind of like some of my doing a lot of stuff on the Spring background. And I guess today we're going to be talking about Tekton, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
And hi, I'm JJ, developer advocate also, and Billy and I are now teammates. We're actually we were cousins in the family tree of IBM for a long time, but we're officially we're actually brother and brother in the family tree.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, from first cousins to proper full brother status, I guess.
Wait, does that mean our parents got divorced? And
I know. Oh, no.
This gets weird really fast.
Is it shared custody or so? I don't know. Yeah,
there you go. Oh, it's great. It's great. So yeah, Billy came to me asking to do a stream around the things that he's been working on quite a bit, and we're gonna have some fun today. I know honestly fuck all about Java, and I never really have learned it. So this is gonna be fun because I'm gonna come in with completely baby eyes. But as Billy said, we're gonna be playing with Tekton, which is something that I've spent too much of my time playing with. So hopefully we can get a really neat narrative going. And from there we'll just share screens, start doing some code. We have a couple questions, and if you have questions as audience members, please never hesitate to ask. We're here to answer your questions, but we do have a nice kind of agenda laid out. So Billy, take it away, sir.
All right, I think I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we can kind of do like a little West Wing of walk and talk, maybe.
Sounds
good. As JJ or as kind of mentioned earlier, like the goal here is to kind of talk about Tekton and particularly talk about it from the perspective of a developer. That's my background as a developer. I'm definitely, everyone has a little experience with DevOps, but definitely much more heavy on the dev side of that background. And so I've been putting together a series, which I call Living on the Cloud, which is kind of a soup to nuts approach of kind of becoming cloud native. And so I came to this of, well, I need to demonstrate a way of doing automated deployments. And so I decided to use Tekton for that. So we're going to kind of look at just setting up a really tool chain, a really simple Tekton pipeline to do that. So IBM offers some great integration with Tekton, and the way you go through that is from the DevOps solution on IBM Cloud, and we're going to set up a really simple tool chain to work with our Tekton pipeline.
So Billy, let's just take one quick step back, because it sounds like you didn't actually say it. Mm-hmm. What's a tool chain?
Yes, so a tool chain is the kind of basic unit of work that I guess or association that IBM has for their DevOps solution. And actually, also correct me here as well if it doesn't match up with what you're hearing or what you perceive of it. But for your team or maybe for your organizational level, you would create a tool chain, and then all your tools like your GitHub repositories or Git repositories, in this case we'll actually be using GitLab, pipelines, quality checks, and so on, like they would all be kind of located here within your tool chain. And actually here we're going to actually start adding some tools to this.
So it's kind of like a visual representation of a workflow of getting some code from a laptop to a production environment, or portions of that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It
Okay.
would be that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Or also if like maybe you're still at a very traditional IT or development
Hmm.
shop, like where your Jenkins, where your Git repositories, where your Jira issue trackers, all of that would kind of be potentially integrated all into this location. And as we start adding some tools to it, you can kind of be able to more visualize properly what I am talking about. So let's actually go ahead and start going with that. And also one other thing is a lot of what we may cover everything in this live stream, but we may not be able to get right to everything. But I will be publishing an article here pretty soon that will actually go through all the steps we'll be going through here, whether it's in this live stream or a couple of them, and even to some future ones as we kind of get into more complex
Hmm.
things for doing Tekton. But all the same, we will add in some Git repositories.
So you said you're going to be using GitLab over GitHub.
Yes.
Was that just?
So yes, I'm primarily, and actually you'll see here, I'm primarily familiar with GitHub, and in fact, where I store all my code for my examples, it's
Mhm.
actually located out on GitHub. However, in this case, I am using GitLab because IBM has our own internal GitLab instance. And one thing I want to try to do when I
Oh,
try to put together,
really?
um, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, so there you go. Awesome. This is a great teaching session as well for you with you as well, JJ. Is I try to keep all the resources located on IBM Cloud just because it lowers the barrier of entry for kind of going through these courses. If it's like, oh, you have to have a GitHub account and you have to have this and you have to have that, that's a bunch of out of bound things that I don't really have control over, and it just makes it that much more difficult than
Mhm.
for someone else to kind of come in and kind of start like going through like a tutorial and put together. So yeah, that's really why I'm using GitLab, and it works fine enough. That said, it's very at the proof of concept level, so I haven't really ever gotten super deep into GitLab, though it's also very popular, so it's not like some sort of crazy sideband solution. So this is our first Git repository, and this one actually contains our quote unquote actual application code. And we're going to be adding two more as well. And I will explain what those are in a moment. Let me just kind of go ahead and get these added. Well, I guess it comes. So what I'm adding here. So like the first one I mentioned was where like the actual quote unquote application code will be located. Here I am adding. So one nice thing. So a bit of frustration, but also a bit of a benefit is Tekton. Like a major architectural goal of it was to be very reusable.
Mhm.
They seem to really emphasize that at all levels. And where that's frustrating is that adds a lot of abstraction layers. At least that's what my perception was. That it added a lot of
Mhm.
these abstraction layers. So it made it very difficult to understand on the uptake. But one benefit of that goal reusability is you can actually kind of course, reuse things. And so some of this might be reusing things within your organization, or some of this might be actually reusing solutions people already have that have this are existing out in open source. Um, so for me, like this living on the cloud, this quote unquote Tekton catalog could be maybe a little bit representative of something that may be within your organization. Um, and I'll touch this a little bit. And then also IBM, we've created our own Tekton catalog as well, called the Open Toolchain Tekton catalog. And that has a bunch of like open source solutions that kind of just address just common things that any organization might need. For example, from this one I'm using, it will be how we're going to get clone the application repository that I added initially. So like, git clone, and there's a bunch of other solutions for like uploading stuff to a container repository and so on. Those are pretty common tasks that aren't going to really change that much between organizations. So why not just kind of use the solution that's out there, that's been tested by, hundreds of thousands of people, and that kind of works. So that's kind of where that benefit, where it might be difficult to kind of initially start learning about Tekton.
Hmm.
That's maybe some of the benefit from the reusability, is that you don't have to develop your own solution for like doing common tasks. All right, so
Hmm. Hmm.
service required. I am not sure what that error means.
Hmm. That's the beauty of doing this live, Billy. Sometimes things just don't
Yeah,
quite
that one
click.
says, that one says it's configured, and that one just did it fine. I'm not sure. Well, let's see. Continuous. Okay. All right. Maybe that will go away here as we can continue configuring. But that's something that's new to me. But we'll
Yeah,
just kind of go past it.
that error is real. That was real time. It's
Yeah.
16:08 UTC right now.
Huh.
So that's a
Okay.
real error.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe hopefully it'll go away here in a few moments. Okay.
Add service group.
Well, okay. Maybe it looks like we might be seeing a little bit of a service disruption, but maybe that will resolve before we get to that. So yeah,
Can you click that add service group real quick for me?
add service.
Yeah, the blue, the first. No, sorry, in the black box says add service right there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So
yeah, go ahead and create.
We talk about continuous delivery, they'll be taking a little bit of a different approach.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. So we'll see. Hopefully, we'll be able to get properly through this. So as I mentioned, we can see we had some of our Git repositories. Another common thing we will need, and actually let me open up a new tab, is ability to store keys securely. And at least in this example, again, I'm using Key Protect. I'm using it just because it's already integrated with IBM. And even though it doesn't show a proper free tier, the first 20 keys, it says it somewhere here, or maybe it would say it for like your account, but the first 20 keys you can store for free. But I'm going to use this because we're going to need to store a few keys in here. And maybe also if we get back to this in a later live stream, we may also go through something like setting up a SSL certificate, where we would also store our SSL certificate keys in here as well. So living on the cloud keys, this is just like a simple name to help us remember it. And then we're going to integrate this into our tool chain as well. And if we just do by secrets, that'll get us it. So Key Protect is an option. Also, HashiCorp is very popular. So that's another solution that maybe people might be more familiar with.
HashiCorp Vault, the default way that you should be like if you're not using something like Key Protect, HashiCorp Vault is something you should be looking at.
Absolutely.
The irony is the irony, at least for me, is I tell people to do it, but I feel unskilled with it completely. I actually I need to spend the time, and maybe that's worth revisiting at a later date. But like just to start and like actually get something functional that is more than the Vault 101 course on learn.hashicorp.com.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and it's just one of those problems is that there's always so much out there to learn, and it's like getting from like that 101 level to that even that 201, like even getting to 101 level can be quite difficult depending on the technology, like Tekton being a good example, or even Kubernetes being another good example, and then getting to like that 201 level is just like another huge commitment, and it just always kind of feels like it's, as developer advocates, like we're spinning plates trying to learn all these different technologies. All right, so we have our place for storing some secrets. So next, what we want to do is also create a private worker. So we'll look at it in a little bit, but Tekton, like Kubernetes, it's built upon Kubernetes. I'm guessing you probably already touched upon that in some of your
Hmm.
previous live streams, but it also then reads from like all these YAML files, and it needs some sort of worker to actually read and execute what's contained within these files. So there are some public workers, public shared workers that IBM provides, but let's go ahead and create a private worker. Right now, those public workers are only um, available in US South. So if you're not in US South, uh, they won't be available to you. And just by having private workers, we get like a little more flexibility, particularly when it comes to debugging. So yeah, this is fine. Service Cloud for living on the cloud. And then we want to save this to our key store, which we'll touch on in a little bit. And we'll go ahead and then create it. And then we'll copy this value. And I will just paste this into, whoop. Okay, there we go. All right, because we'll need this value that's currently, you can't see it, but we'll need it here in a few moments. And we'll, again, kind of give this a somewhat descriptive name. And so this worker is then going to be installed on the Kubernetes cluster that we created a little bit earlier. So that is initially set up. And now what we need to do is run a few commands on our Kubernetes cluster. And I'm going to take the service ID I created earlier. I'll just give it the same name of living on the cloud private worker. And then this will generate for us the code that we need to install this on our Kubernetes cluster. It's just a simple case of copying and pasting some commands. And thank you, JJ, for setting up this Kubernetes cluster earlier. So yeah, this will just take a few moments to install. It's quite quick. All right. And we can just verify then that this actually works. Cool. Let's see. Hopefully.
Looks like things are happening.
Yeah, things are happening. It might. Let's refresh it. Maybe that will show up. It should show up here. Cool. Yep. The worker we just created is now available. So that can be an option then for when we're going to actually build this application. So back to the toolchain. As you can see, it's quickly starting to build up to be something meaningful. Now we're going to actually create our pipeline. And this is like, again, to me, and so we'll use Tekton. And for me, this is also how I came to use Tekton. IBM offers this classic pipeline. And I think this is like something that's completely in-house built, or it's like an open source project, but I think, we're the only one of the major implementers of it. And it works fine enough for a really simple pipeline. And actually for what we're doing here, it would work fine. But as far as actually scaling to the needs of a real enterprise, it wouldn't work. And so Tekton, it provides a lot of flexibility. And so that's kind of where, when I'm putting together this blog series, I don't want it to just have something that like works for your quote unquote hello world. I want something that someone can read it and then yeah, exactly. And then actually build upon it to, address their needs. So we'll call this the living on the cloud pipeline. And we'll go ahead and create this integration. Yeah, because, they read through this and then they're like, oh, wait, this pipeline work or this, implementation just isn't going to suit our needs at all. Well, that's not going to really get them anywhere. And hopefully those warnings, well, all right. And this is another area where I got really confused for a while as well. So here, we're adding a bunch of repositories, but the repositories we're adding here, this isn't going to be the code that we're actually going to be building. What we're adding here is the definitions for the Tekton files that we'll be building from. So we're adding the instructions our pipeline will be reading to actually then do the real work of building the application. And yeah, this was, again, another thing that caused me a lot of confusion when I was initially trying to figure it out. Start. And in this case, my application code, so once this refreshes here in just a moment, I do wish this was a little bit faster. Hopefully we'll continue to add more resources to speed this up. Typically your path will probably just be the root path, in which case you can just do no path. For me, because this is kind of like an example project, the pathing is a little bit deeper. So and also I'm using like different branches to kind of show the different steps as you kind of walk through this course that I have. So this is like a little bit of a deeper pathing and branch and tag than you would probably be doing. Most of the time you'd be doing the trunk based development, kind of like this. So, and then tekton. Yeah, one thing hopefully maybe we'll see is right now, like there doesn't do any recursive like tracking across like the Git repo or across folders. So you have to actually like, once this again reloads, we'll take a look at what this tekton catalog looks like. GitHub. So this is the Open Toolchain Tekton catalog. And so under all these folders are different options. So in this case, Git, we can see like they have a task for doing a repo clone and also setting a commit status and also skipping CI depending upon it.
Hey, Billy, hang on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got distracted for a moment. You went to Open Toolchain Tekton catalog. You didn't go to the Tekton catalog repo.
No. So the Open Toolchain, it is a bit based upon some things with like IBM. So this is all kind of
okay.
So because I believe
it's actually tested on the IBM cloud and with the IBM feature set that we have. So this isn't the one size fits all. This is an IBM specific.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's I think it's or to maybe put it is that it makes sure it works with IBM Cloud. It can maybe work with others. It's just make sure it's built to satisfy our tool needs. If that kind of makes a bit of sense there. But yes, I think we can see it has different options: Cloud Foundry, container, all these things. And at least one minor frustration I have with that is, so like here, make sure, like I have Git, and if I also wanted to bring in the task for Slack or Kubernetes service or any of those other ones, like I would also have to individually add those definition folders here. I couldn't just put the root path and then it could just bring all those in. So it could be just one of those things as you actually make a much more complex tool chain or something like that, you might be adding a bunch of these folders in, and that can start to just be looking like a lot when maybe some cursor pathing could maybe work a little bit better. But maybe they'll change that. Maybe there's also really good reasons why they didn't do that, that sometimes when you're just first learning about something, you don't fully understand. But as you get more familiar, it's like, oh, okay, that actually does make sense. So these are all the definitions for that we'll be building, that'll be providing the instructions for actually running our tool chain. And let me also
Look at that handsome man.
I know that grinning face there. That's back from when I could actually travel. I was taking it to Amsterdam, and yeah, I've really been missing doing some of that travel from time to time. So now we'll use our worker, and we'll just assign the private worker to be used for everything. And so now we need to add our triggers. And this is another area that caused me a bit of confusion when I was initially working on this, just because it kind of becomes a bit of overloading of terms. So let's see. So I created a few. So really kind of what's going on here when we're setting up a trigger is we're actually setting up an event listener. And that provides a sync. And what's going to happen, and we're going to use GitLab. So I created a GitHub and a GitLab, a push event listener, and we'll, again, maybe touch on that here in a few moments. Yeah, we have plenty of time. But it creates a sync, so that way this will set up a webhook with our GitLab. And so whenever commit is pushed, GitLab will then send a JSON message to this event listener, which then can be used to actually to clone our repo and then actually build the code within it. But it's just a bit confusing just because here we have like event listener, and then we have like the word trigger. And when you're just trying to learn all these terms at once, it's a bit confusing to hear like, oh, wait, this is a trigger here. How does it relate to this trigger here? But we're actually setting up an event listener. It's just a bit of a case of like overloading the terms, or it's like or slightly different terminology. I think one thing it just kind of reminds me of is, granted, maybe if you're a younger developer and like everyone's just on Git now, but if you've been developing for kind of longer like we have, I've been doing this for about 12 years now. My first repository or source control management was SVN. And going from SVN to Git, I remember was always a really confusing experience because they use terms slightly differently. In SVN, when you commit code, that actually commits it to the central repository, whereas in Git, committing code only goes to your local repository, and then you would actually have to push it. And things like revert and reset, and it's a slightly different terminology. And so that's kind of like one of the difficulties I also have found is like some of the terminology Tekton uses, it's correct, kind of like how Git, some of the terminology they're using, it is also correct within it. But just because of my priors, it kind of just made it a little more confusing for me to learn it as well. And lastly, we're going to also need to create a event property. And this is where we're going to get the key protect, the benefit of it in, is when we created that service app ID a few steps earlier, we're going to actually use that API key to actually do a lot of the work that our Tekton would need a user for setting up resources on our Kubernetes cluster or talking to other IBM services. So we're going to use that key. And in this case, API key, this is a very specific syntax because under the covers, when this is being set up and run, IBM Cloud, it will set up a secret, like a secure property secret on your Kubernetes cluster, and then specifically use the API key. And we'll look at in a few moments, some of our tasks will then specifically look for this API key to then pull from for then doing specific tasks. So if you're following this, like the syntax of API key, all one word, lowercase, is actually significant. You can't do like API hyphen key or different kind of syntax for it. So some cases, that's again some of the learning lessons that came from the past month or so. I've been learning about this. Was like, oh, okay, this very specific syntax does in fact matter.
the random gotchas that you ran into, the random
Yes, it
stumbling
is
blocks. Yeah.
very fun.
Mm.
All right, why is that giving me a 4 I think I know. I need to log out of my previous account. So we'll give that a second to load. There we go. All right, hopefully that didn't log me out of this as well. Yeah, that's like one problem is when it's initially all logging in, it will assign you into your account for GitLab as well. But if you change accounts on your main IBM Cloud account, it won't also change it for your GitLab account.
Mm.
All right, yes, that's what I want to use. Yeah, so here's the GitLab account. And this is kind of what I was talking about a bit earlier, is that you have these tasks. And actually, let's get let me bring up a picture I've put together to kind of diagram what is happening to make it a little bit easier to consume and understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that will, oh, I just wanted to. There we go. So this is a graph that shows the overall pipeline that we are using. And so, as I mentioned, this is like the GitLab push event listener.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where like a sync, when a Git request is coming, it's going to come to this location to drop off the JSON that of the event that just happened in our GitLab repository. And then it's going to run through this pipeline, and it's going to do these individual tasks like this git clone. So let's go to the top of this real quick. So the first task that we'll run is this clone of the Git repository. And so and this is again kind of where the benefit of being able of reusability comes in, is this is a much more complex task than I put together, but it also has like all those checks in it to make sure everything's like, working correctly before it kind of does everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, typically if you're just like doing it for yourself, you're going to like figure out like whatever little happy path that you have in there to get it working. And then that kind of, overlooks like some of the important like checking you need to do. But it will execute this task to actually clone the repository that has our application code that we'll actually be building. One other thing we need to do is we'll go to here. So this is a private repository, which will be the case for most organizations. You're going to be having code stored in your own private repository that's going to be built because you're fulfilling a specific business need. So Twitch token, and we'll just set it to next. There we go. So next year, and we need a read user to actually read from our account. And we could also store this in our key protect key store, but just in the for time to hopefully get this actually properly running before the stream ends, which we have a little bit of time, but let's just do it this anyways. We'll create another secure one. And we want to call this get access token. And again, in this case, this specifically matters, because in here, this task is going to be specifically looking for get access token value that if it's supplied, then it will use that token to then actually read from our Git repository. So that is saved. And is that it? I think that is it. Let me check my instructions to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, I think that's it. So go back here and we'll just make a small change to actually kick off a push.
All right.
So here's also one thing. So my experience of doing development at a lot of enterprises is that it can often be very difficult to like get a full scope of a project, like what's it using, how is this built, and all that, because to be like, oh, some things will actually be in the code repository, some things will be then someplace else. Go check the wiki. The wiki is never up to date. So a big thing also I cover in my article series is trying to put as much information about a project within the actual code repository, because that's where developers are going to go. If you get more integrated into like a single location, that's going to be your single source of truth. And so that's one of the things I'm doing here is the pipeline information on how to actually build the application. I put it under this file tekton build. And this includes 2 tekton definitions, a trigger template, which we may touch on a little bit later, and then the actual pipeline that lists out all the different tasks we're going to go through as we're building this application. But again, like locating it into the same code repository that's actually being built, along with, say, our Docker file and our deployment YAML, like it goes to one location to figure out how this project actually works and builds. You're not going to have to go check 10 different locations, to figure out how it actually works. But let's just make a small change to the README because we need to have a commit run to actually kick off our build. And that's all we're doing. Yeah, exactly. And hopefully here in a few seconds, that will kick off this pipeline run. Of course, it looks like maybe if you do not take.
Go ahead and click that add service again.
Okay.
And then do the free tier.
Yeah. That's something new.
Yeah, the light one. The light one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And then just hit create.
Yes.
There you go. And then go back to the other tab and refresh that.
Yeah.
There, okay. Go ahead and do another commit.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So
in essence, you hadn't activated Jenkins.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's actually, I'm glad that I ended up doing this because ironically, I don't typically do a whole lot of work out of my primary IBM Cloud account just because it's like already a paid account and it has a lot of many things particularly set up that I don't know about. So usually I set up like my own free account just so I have like a better understanding of maybe where a walk-up user is coming from. But maybe I guess I set something up in that account that I just kind of forgot about. And now, so that was good. That wasn't set up in this account. So is that going to run?
Try click the run pipeline. Let's actually see it work that way first.
So I don't have a manual trigger, so I can't really do that. Ironically, I kind of need to actually kind of go through this process of submitting a commit for it to work. Actually, I was tooling around with something. Okay, I think that's what is causing the issue. There seems to be like a little bug that I'm working with our DevOps team on resolving. It's a bit of a don't look at the man behind the curtain right now moment.
It's all good.
But yeah,
That's the beauty of live streaming.
yeah,
Sometimes
it
things just don't
definitely
go
is.
right.
First, let's make sure this actually resolves the issue. Great. Yeah.
Yay.
So yeah, there seems to be some sort of small issue where there's a few different field types you can pass in parameters. So by default, it will use string. So, and you can provide some useful defaults. So I'll touch on here in just a moment. There seems to be an issue though when it comes to passing in an array type within this pipeline run, which is actually then passing the specific information to our pipeline. So for Java developers, if you're kind of coming at this from a Java developer perspective or developer perspective, you can think of this pipeline as a class. Just think of a specific class that has like, different field members like the task or methods, I guess you could put it. And then a pipeline run is a specific instance of that class. And you can almost think of this as maybe being something like a factory that, kind of already has some things predefined that will then send it off to our pipeline run to create a specific instance. And anyways, passing in a bunch of these parameters, but for some reason, there seems to be some sort of small bug right now where if we pass in an array type, it causes a snafu situation to happen. Of course, and now everything failed. We'll take a look at that here. But one other thing that's also maybe useful to talk about is to talk about useful defaults when building stuff. And that's also part of the reason why you may want to locate stuff within the repository that you're actually building, because you can provide more of those useful defaults. Like, okay, the path to the context, the path to where within this repository file within that's going to actually be built. Okay, I know that location within my code repository. I know the location and name of the deployment file I'm going to use to deploy to Kubernetes. You know which container repo you're going to use, where you can typically store that image, the name of the image, and some of that stuff. So you can provide a lot of these useful defaults within this file here instead of having to write a huge amount of properties here within environment properties that get this to run. You can locate it all within this file. So that's also like an important lesson, is the useful defaults you can provide by locating it within the same repository that it's actually being built. But let's see if we can debug what is going on that's causing this to fail. So task update image ref depends on Maven build, but Maven build wasn't okay, maybe I have some sort of minor name issue. So what it's saying here is down here. So I have a task that's going to update the deployment file with the location and path to the container repository location for the new image that we're actually building within this pipeline. And it's complaining that it's going to run after a previous task and that this task name doesn't exist. And yeah, that's it. So here, actually what this needs to be is run after build artifact from source. And while refactoring this, didn't update this to match that. I was going by the actual name of the task definition itself, not the name of it within the actual pipeline. So let me
I think I'm following you. Yeah,
it's yeah, that's.
Do we need a whiteboard, Billy?
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So this one, update it, and actually Here, I can give a bit of a better description as to what I'm referring to and what went wrong. So here I have a task that is actually building my Java application. It's using Maven. It's building it from a Docker image that the Google Cloud team provided for their cloud builder. And up here, the name of this task that can be referenced in other locations is called Maven build Java artifact from source, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Within the pipeline, though, I just call it a little bit something simpler, build artifact from source. Instead of having the long Maven build artifact from source, within the context of the actual pipeline, this specific task, I just called it build artifact from source. When I was initially working on this project, I just must have copied and pasted this name in both locations. And then when I went through and refactored it, I didn't update it here. And so then also, like, I'm running all my tasks. So like first I'm going to do a git clone. After that, I'm going to build the artifact or build the actual Java artifact. And then I'm going to push that artifact to my container repository. And so I want this to all happen in serial. And for that to happen in serial within Tekton, you actually need to specifically define that as in the run after here as well. I wanted to run after like this build artifact source. And then I want this to run actually the build image CR, because actually in this case, I'm going to be taking a value out of build image CR. So I'm going to build the image and then push it to a container repository. And of course, from that, I'm going to get the actual full path. And then within here, I'm taking the results from that task and then passing that in as a value then to update my deployment file. So when I deploy it out to Kubernetes, Kubernetes then knows where to pull my image from. So I think I have that. And actually, the name, we're using Kubernetes clusters. I did notice one other thing I need to update in here.
And type Asgar, ASGHAR.
Okay, all right, there we go. That's not what I wanted. There we go.
And I believe it forced it to be because I put it capital T. You should have put capital T in there. Otherwise, it gets angry.
Okay. I think I got that. So what I need, so like the name of the cluster I'll be pushing to, I need to update this because when I was doing this, like I was just using simple my cluster, but in this case, I'll be actually using twitch.asgarlabs.io. I think hopefully all this other stuff. Let's actually do, hopefully this will work. It might fall over when we get to this because maybe this container repository wasn't already created, but we'll see. All right, another commit, and hopefully that will start building here pretty soon. Another failure. Trial and error. Deploy image to IBM Cloud and me.
Spec tasks. So look at spec.tasks.
Wasn't okay. Yeah, I thought we updated all those references.
Spec.
So yeah, spec. So yeah, it's always kind of fun to learn all these different, but it's pipeline, spec, and task. So here, pipeline, spec, and task. You know, it's kind of like one of the most important things as a Java developer was learning how to read a stack trace. Be like, oh, the stack trace usually kind of tells you which class you need to go to. So yeah, build artifact from source. All right, build artifact from source. What is it complaining about again? Okay. Okay, yeah. Again, I think I just need I need to go back through and make sure all my code is up to date. One of those things of going through some refactor cycles, and I just didn't copy it back back to where I should have been. So again, I was having this run after this task reference that doesn't make sense, and actually that was even a wrong location to be doing that in. So actually, I need to get rid of that as well. All right. This should hopefully at least run further. We should hopefully hopefully that resolves at least all the initial build errors, and this will actually at least run for some extent.
It's never easy, Billy.
It never is. Image. All right. Pipeline spec params. So one of my parameters doesn't exist. Yeah, I need to get this code updated on my GitHub. Deployment image placeholder. Let's see. Yeah.
And just to mention this, if anyone who is watching live right now has any questions or thoughts, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I am watching it to make sure that if you do have any questions, we can answer them also.
And yeah, actually, we really don't need a description here. We'll commit those changes. And then fingers crossed that this actually will work this time. So what was going on there is, let's see. So I have a task that, all right. So pretty much I have a task that can go through and just update arbitrary files within a deployment YAML. And pretty much I'm going to have this look for a placeholder value and then replace it with a different value. If we go into Storm Tracker here, my deployments. So here, like the image that Kubernetes will then pull down and deploy out there, I have image that I'm going to pass in, or that's just like this placeholder value that just needs to be updated. And in my tekton build, I have then this deployment image placeholder called image. And pretty much I just had it up here within my trigger template, which I guess we're kind of running low on time. We may not have time to get too deep in on. Maybe we can do that in a future stream. I had it up here, but I didn't actually then have that getting passed down into our pipeline. Yeah, that's again kind of one of the difficulties when it comes to tekton is that reusability creates a lot of abstraction layers. So like you have to define it here, you have to define it here, you have to define it like in 5 different locations. That like it seems like sometimes to get something to properly run, and we're just working through a few errors here, unfortunately.
It's all good. It's good it's good explanation of being caught on these things. So when people watch this in the future, they can see that, these are the things they should look out for.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah. So database binding. All right.
yeah.
Ah,
Fell off the
you all
desk.
right? All right. Plus there. Yeah, it seems I was using a slightly older version of this code than I thought I was. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad that this is happening to some extent, which I knew tested this out a little bit more before, but that way, whenever this article is published, it will be all the correct code that's actually out there, and people aren't getting incorrect information, which is always important.
Isn't the joke as soon as you publish an article, it's already out of date?
That is true. And actually, and that will be definitely some cases to some of the stuff I'm working on. It's just like, I can't wait that long to publish it because I've already had this article I've been working on. I don't know. It felt like it's been like my full-time job for, I don't even want to know how long. But yeah, I want to get it done.
Yeah, no, it's a joke, really. No, you're doing great
yeah,
work.
I know. Thank you. I'm just thinking about some of the stuff I've been doing for us. It's like, I want to go on to other stuff. All right. Yeah, I'm just kind of putting some quick fixes in here just to see so we can actually get a proper build going, hopefully, at some point. Okay. Now we're making a little slight progress.
Hey, progress is progress.
Exactly. Nice. Pipeline right is missing.
Just got to make sure you're going the correct direction for progress.
Yeah. Very slowly. All right. And I think
Update deployment.
That's not found. Oh, I know what that. So yeah, clearly I need to get some of my code actually updated on my GitHub. So yeah, I just had that name out of date as I kind of refactor it to make it a bit more generic because I'll be using it in some different situations further down instead of just specifically for deployment YAMLs. But what has been your kind of experience so far with Tekton? Love it, hate it, still not sure about it?
So the Tekton I've been playing with is
we actually have a build going finally. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So the Tekton I've been going with is very core primitives of Tekton. What you're showing off here is some nice porcelain to talk to the plumbing of Tekton, which seems to be the way that a lot of people are coming to Tekton, is that they use something like Jenkins X, or in this case, IBM Cloud continuous delivery in the pipeline here. Or sorry, the tool chain. So it's interesting to have those conversations when people come in from the community saying, like, I'm using Tekton and blah 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 is broken.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge is because so many the developers of Tekton are talking in primitives, there's a disconnect between the porcelain and getting the APIs to work.
Yeah.
I will say there's a huge plus from what the direction I've been coming in, which is just the primitives, because it's forced me to learn so many more advanced Kubernetes concepts to be able to make sure Tekton is successful.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting part about that is if you're not required to know this stuff and you just need to use the porcelain, there are a lot of dragons. There are a lot of dragons in the
yes,
Tekton
there
world.
is. Yes, there absolutely is. So it looks like, yeah, I got a failure when I'm trying to download the code. So, yeah,
Oh, that was a was that a 403? I didn't see
403. So it looks like it was. So it looks like for some reason this get access token, it wasn't happy with that. However, it does bring a point that I wanted to get back to. So in here, when we created this get trigger, what IBM, and so we, gave it the location of the Git repo that we're going to be, checking from and all that information and all that jazz. So what IBM Cloud did, it went out to this GitLab and it created a web hook. And now this is what I was talking about when I said this created the event listener creates a sync, is whenever we get a push event, GitLab will now send a JSON request to this location that's set up on somewhere in IBM Cloud. You can, obviously see it here. And it will send a push. And within that push, it has this big JSON message. And it will say, okay, this is the commit that we just pushed, the commit ID, which, of course, if you remember from like Git, it uses like a long SHA to kind of, say that. And then it also has down here the repository that it's coming from, this Git HTTP URL. And so I pass this information then to, I'll pass this information to this this Git clone task, which will then take the Git access token, the repository URL, and the commit ID, which is somewhere in here, but all the same, it will take the commit ID and then clone that repository down, and it will put it then into it will then put it into this workspace that will have the code for the application that we're building. So then here, so that it'll have that code so we can then build the application. And of course, like our deployment file and our Docker file and all that other stuff is here. So like here, when we're building the image and sending it to our container repository, it has that Docker file located there to then build it. And then when we're updating the deployment file with the reference to the image that we just created, again, it will have that code there locally to then do that update for it. And again, also here, when we're actually going to then apply that deployment file to our Kubernetes cluster, it will just all have that located there so it can actually do the work that you actually need to have done. Yeah, it has been a long learning lesson, and there's still a lot to learn. Some of the difficulty is like also I found is like the core Tekton, it has a lot of things, but like, yeah, setting up like a trigger to where you commit some code to your Git repository, and then that kicks off a build. As far as I know, that doesn't rest in core Tekton. Like right now, you would actually have to go into Tekton, with like the CLI, and then manually kick off a build, providing maybe the information. Do I have that right? Or
no? If you want to real quick, just take a look at the primitives of it. If you could just go to github.com/tektoncd/triggers, I believe it is.
So actually, I am in this case. So triggers is a sub project that I'm using.
Yes. If you go to the
Um,
docs right there, top.
yeah.
Docs.
So yeah, that's actually what I'm using. I'm using an event listener to do that. So
The actual build though of using the triggers correctly, and
uh-huh.
if you're curious, I can show you the video of it of us figuring it out last week.
Okay.
It actually builds the trigger or the webhook for you on the GitHub side. And I believe it actually calls the GitHub API and creates it to do everything for you to make it happen. We had problems with SSL and a few other things on
Okay.
the public internet. So.
Okay, so the core does that because I mean that's what also happened here is GitLab, just like with GitHub, it went out and created this webhook. So that way, you know, whenever a push event happened or whatever you want to have happen, it will send a JSON message to it. So, okay, I didn't know if that was something that was actually IBM Cloud specific happening, but that's actually the core tekton that's actually doing that webhook information. Okay, that's good to know. I wasn't quite sure about that. I'll have to update my documentation then. So I think we're a little bit past noon or past 12 my time. How long do we have the stream for? Or
I believe we can go as long as you want, Billy. If you want to keep pushing through, you're like I think hang on one second.
Yes.
I would like to stop by in the top of the hour, just because I got to eat.
Yes, same here. So let's see if I can just I'm going to try one little thing to see if we can maybe at least get past this 403 error. And if not, you know, we can do another stream later on where we can kind of get through all these other issues. No, so August 18th, 2020.
Well, since it's only read user, it's not.
Well,
should just be read user. Oh, okay. I would imagine it'd be read
repository. Yep, that was it. Twitch token 2. Okay, yeah, I think they changed that recently. How whatever. They made some changes to this to where it's different. And actually, hold on. Let's not just check everything. All we need is read repository. This should resolve it. And let's copy that. I think we're still going to fail later on. But that's fine. You know, it'd be kind of nice to at least get a little bit farther into this. Save it. And we'll go back to here. Once again, we just need to fake a change basically to tell it to run again. Yeah, I guess actually one little cheat we could also do if you wanted, since we're not actually making a change to this code, is we could just simply tell the GitLab to resend the last JSON request. All right. There we go. Let's see if this actually, cool. All right, so it cloned it. Now it's going to build the Java artifact. And you can see like the full context and like see like the JSON message that was sent to this as well. That kind of started off this kick or this build, and you can see the different values that are being sent in. One thing that's also helpful, I know this is actually still technically in beta, but I will show you this anyways. I believe it's enter true.
Maybe.
But a cool little thing that our DevOps team showed me for yes. So here we're pulling in a bunch of different definitions for what's going on. And so like when I was having some errors earlier, really I probably should have used this to try to check them earlier. But this shows you all the different definitions that are being pulled in up here, all consolidated into a single view. So you can actually see what code is being pulled in, because you're like, hold on, I thought I updated this value and it's not showing up in here. You can actually, look and check to see what value is being pulled in. And if it's not being pulled in, you can be like, oh, okay, maybe I forgot to commit that code or something like that. And you can also click validate here.
And because it's beta, it doesn't work.
Yeah, unfortunately, I guess it's beta in there. There's something going on there. Typically, it would show maybe either errors that are occurring or also warnings. Like, for example, like let's say you have like a parameter value that you define, but you're never using. It'll say like, hey, this, you defined get repo URL, but you're not using it anywhere. It will tell you that, which can be kind of useful for, finding out, debugging things and why things aren't working. All right, and that's slowly working. One last thing I also want to show is, so because we're using a private worker, it's actually then being all run on our hardware or on our cluster. And this could be, and so here we can actually see the namespace that was constructed that will contain all the resources that are being built out. And this could be good also for potential debugging issues to figure out, oh, hey, why isn't this working? So like right now, by default, once this pipeline has completed, whether successful or unsuccessful, this namespace will be deleted. But if you actually do need to make some, or you do need to do some debugging, like, hey, these are failing, I'm not sure why, and like the error messages you're getting from the dashboard aren't good enough, you can actually worker agent. If you go down here, you can edit this to where you do like keep NS, keep namespace. If you set this to true, then the namespace won't be deleted by once a pipeline run is done. So this can actually be good for debugging purposes. And it's also one other advantage of having a private worker over a public worker is you can also have better debugging options for whenever inevitably errors do happen, like kind of saw in our example here.
Nice.
But yeah, now it's building through. Yeah, I think it's build push. Yeah, so I think what happened is the container repository wasn't already created before. Yeah, like the namespace living on Cloud Twitch stream, we didn't get that set up before, so that's probably why that failed. But that's fine. Like I said, maybe in a future stream I can come back on, we can kind of get this actually built and deploying to our cluster, and then kind of show some other cool things I'm actually also working on as well. But yeah, it has been an experience for sure, learning Tekton. For me, I think the reusability and then all the abstraction layers that come from that reusability have made it a little bit more difficult to kind of initially learn it, though there are some benefits, like we saw with the Tekton catalogs, to that reusability that, for your organization, you're not going to have to write your own task for doing git clone or something like that, or pushing it to some container repository. You're going to have that option already provided for you, and you can just kind of bring it in. Let's see. Did you have any other questions or anything you think we should maybe touch on before?
No. You've answered all the questions we set out.
Cool.
And it's actually really nice to see this from the porcelain side of Tekton, using everything inside the IBM Cloud.
Yeah.
I want to reiterate that this was looking at Tekton from an IBM centric point of view,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
fine. I mean, it's on our cloud. That's expected. But if you're an enterprise developer and you are mandated to use all the tools inside of IBM Cloud due to security reasons and or whatever, this shows that you can get a, well, almost a full pipeline up and running, to be all internally at IBM Cloud, so you can focus on the development and get the velocity that you want for your projects done on
Yeah.
our cloud, which is very, very nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things that, you know, I kind of view as a benefit of being quote unquote cloud native is instead of taking the time to configure your own dashboard or whatever it might be, whether it's IBM Cloud or AWS or Azure or GCP or any of the other cloud, like they're going to have similar Tekton integrations as well, you know, and so instead of spending, of course, granted, like Jenkins, I think that's pretty pre-built in. I haven't quite worked with it too much yet, but instead of spending a bunch of time putting together your own dashboard and all that integration stuff, might as well just use the cloud that you're already using to kind of run that stuff and actually, you know, like you said, get the velocity for your team, focus on your own business concerns instead of building out a dashboard.
Exactly. Because no boss wants you sitting there messing and twiddling with CI/CD when you should be doing stuff for the business.
Exactly. Yeah. Let us developer advocates show you how it's done. We're paid to do that. For you, you know, for your for developers, you're actually more concerned with actually getting real work, real work, at least real business work done.
exactly. Real work done.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's great. This is a good place to end, Billy.
All right. Cool.
I'm pretty happy. You want to stop sharing your screen and we can just say goodbye?
Yes.
Though I will give this a couple more minutes. We had a handful of people watch, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So if you are still watching and have any thoughts or questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat for a couple more minutes here. Otherwise, we'll say goodbye.
All right. Yep. Thanks for anybody who joined us. And of course, if you have questions later on, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll probably put in here, I think, our okay, I don't know. For some reason, there we go. There you go. You can find me at Billy Corando on Twitter. So feel free to DM me. I'll be happy to answer any questions or anything like that. So, all right.
Awesome. Cool. All right, sir. Thank you.
All right, man. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.